Welcome to Lit Youngstown's Uplifting Voices series. Thank you for joining us, and many thanks to these writers for coming in from the garden or Shakespeare in the park or a walk with the dog or whatever they might have done on this July evening. Here in Youngstown, Ohio, small remnants of Hurricane Beryl came through yesterday and cleared the air. So I have a lovely breeze floating in through the window and some bird song. I also want to thank Lit Youngstown's media coordinator, Ashley Dillon, for her behind the scenes work to keep everything running smoothly this evening. And tonight's reading will be followed by a conversation. Our first reader is Mary McLaughlin Slechta. Mary is winner of the Kimbilio National Fiction Prize for Mulberry Street stories. She's also the author of a choose your own adventure style book, The Spoonmaker's Diamond, and a poetry collection, Wreckage on a Watery Moon. She has published several chapbooks, and her work appears in journals and anthologies, including Obsidian, Literature and Arts in the African Diaspora, and Best Small Fictions 2021. She is recipient of the Charlotte and Isidor Paiewonsky Prize from the Caribbean writer and has twice served as poet in residence at Chautauqua. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you, Ashley, for hosting. And I'm so excited to be here with Terry, Courtney, and Leslie. I can't tell you, I was up till 1:30 reading your work, and in some cases rereading things. So I a little bit of circles around my eyes, but it was well worth it. Wonderful work, and I'm excited to be here. We also had a storm last night. I'm in Syracuse, New York, and so I decided to read a little bit a story about Syracuse. It doesn't figure a storm, but it figures some of the history of Syracuse, and it's from my collection called Mulberry Street. The conductor. Getting off exit 31 late at night and climbing the steep hill into the east side of the city is a worry. 100 yards before your ascension, your route intersects with the boulevard flowing along the former channel of the Erie Canal. Night or day, traffic lights here are notoriously long, and at this moment, a red light is providential. In front of you, the westward current shimmers with the ambient lights of a gas station and supermarket. Try not to be troubled by the stained roadway ahead, where in bigger cities one would find a pedestrian crosswalk. The red. It might be a reflection from the traffic light or residue of an accident, a frequent occurrence at this spot, but the town planners will not budget crosswalks for another decade. The red. It's impossible to tell its origin from inside your vehicle, and you have somewhere to be. So concentrate on what's to your right and at the triangular island which cuts between you and the eastward flow, the oasis for panhandlers. The workers in this ancient industry are gone, and at this late hour, tucked under bridges or sheltering at the shelter. Your eyes seize on what is left behind, scattered water bottles glittering like seashells. Now blink, if you must. Blink away that tick, that prick, that red, white, blue flickering flick of the disembodied arm of Paul Bunyan, that most American of American folk heroes, ceaselessly chopping his axe above the dark supermarket. Not much time. Quickly, focus ahead, shift your eyes to the left, and squint, just there, for you won't believe me otherwise. You must see for yourself, in the parking lot of the former bike shop, across from the all-night McDonald's. Zombies. The light won't stay red forever, so you must decide now to continue straight or find a different crossing. The choice is not always available if you're in a hurry, for instance, or neurotically connected to your GPS. If you do go straight and the zombies run like deer into your headlights, you face a quandary. Hit them square on and doom yourself to eternity, or lay on the horn in bowel-loosening terror until they grow bored of battering the thin wall of metal between you and them. Very rarely a cop will come out of McDonald's. Cops aren't any braver around zombies than anyone else, so you shouldn't expect Rambo. No matter. This particular band has an aversion to police. At the least scent, they wave their arms like oily seabirds and scatter. You're in luck. Aside from yourself, there are two others attentive to the streets tonight. Brothers and sisters, a woman calls from the top of the hill. Take heart. You miss the other. In his dark dress coat and top hat, he is as much a part of the island as the litter and directional arrows. Slouched in a sitting position, the old man dozes on his cane, wheezing and snoring in time with old Paul, still chopping away at the night. There is a ring of keys attached to the lanyard at his waist. A ring to every lock in the world, he proclaimed, if you met him jingling down the aisle of public transport. At his feet is a square of cardboard that has survived the heat of yesterday morning, followed by the torrential rain of the afternoon. In 6 months, it will survive the snow, for its sturdiest stone, his sign, and etched with a single word and permanent marker, hope. Some history is needed. First, about the businesses that root below the boulevard, spreading fast as kudzu, although the occupants come and go, reeling in passers-by as easily as fishing in April. It hasn't always been all money around here. 1,000 years before the drive-through restaurants and adult clubs, this land belonged to the Onondagas, still does. One of the 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee Iroquois Confederacy, brought together by the peacemakers. The discovery of salt around 1654 by French missionary Father Simon Le Moyne was eventually superseded by the establishment of English colonies. By 1825, America was a free and independent country in the Erie Canal, a 363-mile system of locks that stretched from Albany to Buffalo, a glowing example of the young nation's supremacy. Some might add its inevitability. The system transported goods as well as people, some of whom were escaping bondage in the southern states. That's the next part of the history. The city and surrounding area became an important and storied stop along the Underground Railroad. A newspaper of the time called it, quote, a hotbed of abolitionist activity. After 1850, with the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act and the criminalization of aiding and abetting escape, the goal wasn't simply to reach north, but to reach Canada. One notable stop along the railroad was the house of former slave and firebrand Reverend Jermaine Wesley Logan. The Lord bless him, as the passengers used to say. Despite threats for life and freedom, he may as well have placed an actual welcome mat on the porch, where he publicly chided his neighbors to look out for the least of these. Nowadays, houses across this region appear on the National Register of Historic Places, homes such as those designed by famed architect Ward Wellington Ward. As fine as they are, these houses are far less significant than that of the good Reverend's, but it was his that was torn down in the late 20th century. His great wooden door with its iron knocker, loud enough to get heaven's attention, replaced with an automatic door into a chain pharmacy. His good and firm handshake supplanted by the cold eye of the manager. There was so much to manage, so much we managed to miss as we buy our cleanups and lottery tickets, while we hold up the line counting the pills for our bad backs and sciatica because the pharmacist looks shifty. So much history that is not all behind us. If we stop measuring in miles, you can glimpse the true distance crossed to reach the Logan stop from the farthest reaches of bondage. But can you hear the disappointment? See the arm waving of the unhappy souls, feet weaving in exhaustion, the madness caused by prolonged hunger and fear. You can if your eyes are sharp enough, if you unwind your car window and listen. But you must be kidding, I hear you say. This is nothing but noise wrapped in silence. A few visual iterations of the zombie language might prove useful. Take a pen from the glove box and spell a dying man's cry for his mother and her answer from the grave. Conjugate the scream of a child being tasered in the next classroom. Parse out the separation of neck from noose, flesh from bone. But perhaps the exercise above is too cruel, too difficult, too precise. Perhaps you prefer a more speculative approach. So instead, consider questions the zombies might be asking each other and anyone listening. You are still listening, aren't you? Where is the door we were promised? Where are the ringing words of Logan and his friend Frederick, his own home burned to the ground in 1872? Where is our king? In the absence of answers, the digestion of the accidental traveler, the occasional do-gooder offering socks and water, is scarce recompense for the zombies' profound disappointment. Noise wrapped in silence, or silence wrapped in noise. Does it matter? There isn't much to add, though I urge you to talk to the woman piloting a cardboard ship to these strange shores. She wears a dress and head wrap so white they would shame a ghost. But it is her feet she is most proud of. Those ashy, unashamed mud mashers visible as she disembarked, bent at the waist, nearly L-shaped from her long confinement. This way, she whispers, shooing zombies under the noses of the cops and the staff of the all-night McDonald's. This way, across the eastward flowing current of the boulevard. This way, from the hurt and hunger of a cruel world. She could be mistaken for one of those kindly grandmotherly types forever underestimated, whose insistence on being understood and obeyed for one's own good means she always shall be. But she is here, so much for herself as for anyone. Listen to the slap of bare feet as she leads the tired band to the island. Feet she has earned, feet so rooted to this earth in hope that her spine straightens. She calls out a God from his slumber. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. Courtney Morrow is a poet creating from her studio in Cleveland, Ohio. Her work has received support from 68 to 5, the Academy of American Poets, the Studio Museum in Harlem, Prairie Schooner, Tin House, and Transition Magazine. She has her MFA in poetry from the Ohio State University. In 2023, she was awarded the Walter Rumsey Marvin Grant Award from the Ohioana Library Association for her essay, The Care and Keeping of You. When she's not writing, she's co-running Studio Reciprocity, a consulting collective that helps organizations and individuals heal, reimagine, and transform. Welcome, Courtney.
Thanks so much, Karen. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be in conversation with all of these beautiful, incredible, amazing Black women. And Mary, that was incredible. I love the narrator. I love like the all the choices and the direct address and also the content. I feel like you inspired me to shift what I was gonna open up with. I'm going to open up now with a poem, and it's sort of taken from a series. It's inspired by a series of photographs made by Dawoud Bey, where he sort of recreated enslaved people's route through Ohio, retraveling the Underground Railroad, trying to make it to the shore of Lake Erie. And I am from Cleveland, Ohio. I am relearning about the land that I come from and the fugitive nature of the land that I come from that I didn't know while I was growing up. And so this poem is sort of inspired by that. It's called Mirage on the Water, after Dawoud Bey. Staring at a gelatin silver print of the lake that rests at the bottom of my window, I'm reminded of the city of my youth. The way it flickers from 25 floors up where I live, hovering out the window. The sound of the waves crashing into my ear canal nightly. The same sound people thought was hope as they waited on the shore for boats to take them beyond this nation. Crossing that same border, mist and steam languish behind me. Sand falls from my clutch like a good myth should. There is no utopia on the other side, I know. There is just another night coming tenderly, Black like me, imperfect. I put my head down. I get past the barbed wire. Staring at the gallery wall, it's clear fugitivity is to keep spinning through whatever turnstile turns us closer to an open wind. So from there, I'm gonna transition to this piece that I wrote. It took me a year to write. It's a heroic crown sonnet, and it's really rooted in like LeBron James, in the myth of the hometown hero, which came from like a prompt during my MFA where everyone was writing about their favorite myths, and I was not a good student. I did not read my myths. So I didn't have a lot of Greek myths to reference, but I did have the myth of LeBron James. And so I rooted my poem in that. And I haven't had the chance to read it in full yet, so I'm excited. So we'll see how it goes. It's called Colorway Crown. Hope is a kid stepping onto a court, tossing chalk up into the sky, possibilities lingering, landing into 20,000 fans snapping shots. The roar that follows sounds like faith placed into the palms of an 18-year-old with nerves, sweat beating, in need of an antidote, talcum powder poured out in excess, exhaling as if magic could spew from the mouth of a rookie rallying to break a curse. Planes soaring over Cleveland, where we all dreamt of flight. To get someplace higher, we scanned the sky, seeing only his wingspan wrapping our city. His wingspan stretched across our city, levitating over the land barren, once built up on the wealth of a baron. Black gold worth billions of bucks, pastel pink paper, shuffling like monopoly money, mini mansions. We are the small silver pieces moving across the board, stuck drawing question cards. Affluence in the archive. Now this city is filled with shuttered storefronts, plywood sheets, the wolf gray patina of a public dwindling in perpetuity. They say growing up in Cleveland means finding a way out of amber rust, the color of defeat. Amber rusted, the color of defeat, the same color as the carbon flame burnt above the horizon, the alchemy of limestone turned to a liquid molten metallic. The alchemy of the mill closing, pensions refined down. We all failed chemistry, but we knew the elements of nature. We knew if you said every man for himself, then it meant to take off, feet scrambling in every direction. We knew how hard it would be to bring this town back to life. Still, we dreamt of a rebirth. The mistake on the lake, a looped laugh track, we placed redemption onto a lone soul. Redemption placed onto a single soul, he stepped into it like a colorway. Bright crimson, boy chosen, hometown hero, frozen at the top of the three, triple threat pose, ready to pivot. Can he handle the pressure? Silence and murmurs until he finally broke the fourth wall, driving toward the hoop. Look at all the ways he put on for us. Put on 5 playoffs, a 39-2 record. He brought in $500 million, put on 640 muscles. He put on every position, stacked them, threw us his headband. We watched him run with it, suited in gold. He ran with it, suited in gold and wine, chasing a ring, radiating a light formed from the beginning. Tiny LeBron, beaming softly, a hunger in the flesh in the form of a bowl of cereal, fruity pebbles soaked in milk. He said he didn't realize how broke he was until he went to the neighborhood I grew up in, where a pantry was a place for snacks instead of at the top of the fridge. I once laughed at a kid for his off-brand box of cereal. Ascension was the goal, doing whatever it takes, not new. Consider the weight of a narrative. Consider the weight of a narrative, what it would take to fulfill it. Training 3 times a day, mastering the science of proper nutrition, hydration, and the restoration of each muscle. Shots on repeat, replayed, play-by-play, do it until every spot in the arena feels familiar. At the baseline, me and my best friend stood, interning, unfolding paper, scripted in neon was written, Rondo is a decoy. We held it like a key that could unlock a victory. We wanted a cheat code. Wondering would that be enough to make a team crumble? Is it enough to make a man crumble? Seeing the pothole in his mind, wheels spinning, trying to get out. We all have had a block before. We have all been blocked. But at the watch party for Game 6, I sat next to grown men screaming shots as if they were the man in the arena, seeing fans pinning performance on a single player, saying he's a false prophecy. As if they were never a little kid, clinging to the orange box of their own minds, lacing up a vision. Before losing, I understood the inevitable threshold looming. Every hero leaves home, the crossover. Every hero leaves their home, crossing to new heights. The morning of the decision, LeBron woke up with a nightmare, pressure building. He called his mom and analyzed his dreams. She said, do what'll make you happy. Do what'll let you sleep at night. 10 million people watched, then gasolined his name. I saw a monument come down in less than a day, workers clipping wings overnight, grown men weeping aloud, the psyche of abandon embedded. It's the sound of silence, absence, only a basketball bouncing on hardwood and the whole world spinning like orange leather. spinning the whole league like it's orange leather, landing in Biscayne Bay, the air sticky, snow, and unfamiliar substance. He took the whole crew with him and gained a new one on the court. Some people say when you leave, don't look back. Others say take the whole team with you. I chose the former, ghosting my past, its people. I didn't know that in the folds, where the belly joins the legs, pressure hides in a tiny tendon, peach-colored, fibers connecting the pelvis to the knee. Pivots, advance pressure, building strains. To heal, support what's surrounding it. The decision, I can't do it alone. The decision, he won't do it alone. Or like this. Season 1 on South Beach, he operated from a sour source. See, it's clear that recentering the spirit is a kind of practice. What is the sound of a system betting against you? I too had to relearn to move from a place of warmth. Weighted with loss, I couldn't see a future. When I stepped out, everyone was too loud. The sound of life swallowing me. Have you ever been so low you had to write down reasons to keep going? You deserve joy to wake up and pick life, the decision longevity options, being able to put yourself in a place where you can grow, even if it is the opposite of what the outside world wants. What if we don't need to be loyal to those who think they own us, our stories? What if the bottom line is just a place for you to walk on? Concrete city full of angels choosing to see abundance. While other people come up, we focus on coming down. Eyes on the cylinder, success is hearing the swish. What if we untied our worth from institutions? What if we were all free agents untethered? If we were all free agents untethered, the systems tethering us would also have to go. Are there free agents in a structure where there's still an owner? Maybe rose gold owners banking on the work of those below them. My decision to quit came from a place of questions, not answers. The only clarity was sitting across from my great aunt, having her ask me why I waited so long to show up for her. Going home felt like a fadeaway in reverse. Now the city has its arms open, no longer upset. We took our talents and multiplied them. We took our talents to multiply and came back home for game 7. Just 1 minute left on the clock, score 89-89 at the top of the 9, roof heavy, the whole city hanging from high rises, parking garages, poles, pickup trucks, everyone needing new heights to see if we could really come back from 3-1. We could see the dreaded spell and bad karma being released. We could see 2 players embracing under the net. We ran down 29 flights to see LeBron sobbing on the court, just a kid. Against those ill wishes, we all witnessed. Against all odds, we were all witnesses of what a mistake it was to douse his name in flames, just like it was a mistake to create an idol out of a free agent, to think a man should be loyal to any state. There is nothing left to prove. At the top of the all-star stage, he stood, standing ovation. There is no such thing as giving back when you never really left. Home is just an orientation. Age is just warm patina like Vachette. Driving past my old house, I saw 2 feet in the backyard launching toward a steel rim. Hope is a kid stepping onto a court. Hope is a kid stepping onto a court, a wingspan stretched across the city, amber rusted, accustomed to losing. We placed redemption onto a rookie and watched him run with it, suited in gold. Consider the weight of a narrative. Is it enough to make a man crumble? Every hero has to leave home, crossing over, spinning the whole world like it's orange leather. The decision, I can't do it alone. The decision, longevity, options, if we were all free agents untethered, taking all our talents to multiply. Against all odds, what could we all witness? I think I'll stop there. I don't know how many minutes I've been going, but that's my little heroic crown sonnet. And yeah, excited to keep hearing other people and also be in conversation. So I'll pass it back to Karen.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Leslie Nneka Arima was born in the UK and grew up in Nigeria or wherever her father was stationed. Her stories have been honored with the National Magazine Award, a Commonwealth Short Story Prize, the Kane Prize, and an O. Henry Award. Her work has appeared in The New Yorker, Harper's, McSweeney's, Granta, and has received support from the Elizabeth George Foundation, United States Artists, and McDowell. She was selected for the National Book Foundation's 5 Under 35, and her debut collection, What It Means When a Man Falls from the Sky, won the 2017 Kirkus Prize, the 2018 New York Public Library Young Lions Fiction Award, and was selected for the New York Times PBS Book Club. She lives in Minneapolis. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. I have enjoyed the readings so much, and I'm so excited to be in conversation with all of the women here, and also very excited to hear Terry read. So I am going to be reading a story, portions of a part of a short story titled Every Story Has an Ending. And mine is 12 years, mine is in 12 years. I've never been able to see my own death, but knowing me, I choke on a sliver of spinach or forget to wear compression socks on a long-haul flight, catch an embolism, and die origamied into my sad little window seat. But right now, 11 years, 11 months, and 364 days before my story ends, I am in my car, curled over a bowl of noodles, watching a YouTube compilation of people surviving wild accidents unscathed. The video has 17 minutes to go, my break has 10, so I'm 7 minutes late getting back, and Franna Banana taps where her watch would be if she wore one. I mimic the gesture with my middle finger, and she serves one right back. I am the last of a string of temps she has run off with her meanness, but I like the mean, and she just plain likes me. It's a good fit. There are 6 POs on my desk, and I take my time logging them into the database, poking at the keyboard I get my poke back. The feigned earnestness of my first week got me nowhere with Francisca, who responded by trying to break me, which might have worked if it actually been nice, but you can't really fuck with someone who's faking it. She pointed out every stray smudge on the purchase order I handled, stared at me for a hard 3 seconds if I coughed or shifted in my seat. The previous temp had quit in tears after Francisca said, "You're doing it again," every time she breathed audibly through a bad cold. Kill her with kindness, advised my psychiatrist, who I'm convinced is a series of greeting cards in a trench coat. She will die in 42 years, 5 weeks after her 90th birthday, all her enemies dead, the hilt of kindness speckled with their gristle. She doesn't believe that I can see when people are going to die, insists that it's a coping mechanism, a psychosis I've developed as a result of that unfortunate period where I did all the shrooms, or perhaps my mind's inability to cope with the suddenness of my parents' tragic death. I don't insist. I don't tell her that there was never a time I didn't know when people would die. My first memory was my mother's face, and the second were the numbers that floated above her head, counting down to January 29th, 2010. Before I knew what it was, I thought that my father's date was the same because they belonged to each other, which was right in a way. But knowing the time of death for everyone you've ever met is not the sort of thing you try to force someone to believe, not when that someone has the power to put you in a 72-hour hold. Besides, telling a person when they're going to die never works out the way you think it should. So I was all niced out by the second week, and when Francisca Thibodeau made a big unnecessary deal about me being 2 minutes late, I wrote a very long email with citations about how time was a construct. I could hear her laughing, and when I went to grab the POs, she had printed my email and pinned it next to her calendar. Like I said, a good fit. Bill walks in, and he can never help himself. Always got to say something, and this time he goes with, "Just look at you two. Dark chocolate and white chocolate. Well, not white chocolate, caramel. Chocolate and caramel, like my favorite candy bar." None of the guys are there to laugh with Bill, who would die of a heart attack at 67, and he withers under our silence. Before he can clear his throat and try to make it less unbearable, I do that thing where I release just a bit of Igbo back into my accent and ask in faux confusion, "This your candy bar? It sounds very, very soft." Bill's ears turn red, but Bill is Bill, so he blusters through it, asking if all the outstanding POs are in the system and to make sure that there aren't any mistakes. You temps are always making mistakes. I, who have never made a mistake in my fucking life, fume, but keep my temp mouth shut. The pay is decent, the work is nothing. Frana Banana comes to my defense, but she goes at it sideways, handing Bill a list of fuck-ups the sales guys made that would have bankrupted the entire state, nay, the entire country, if I hadn't caught them. I didn't catch anything but a few typos, but by the time Francisca is done, I am the linchpin holding together these United States. I begin to suspect I might have written the Constitution. Her job is data entry, not data correctory, and y'all's job is not making mistakes. So, thank you for doing your job, Bill. The air crackles with something, and not like a sexy something, but a let's go to the parking lot and make jousting a thing again. And I just direct my temp eyes to my temp fingers and mind my temping business. Bill walks off without saying anything, and Francisca sighs, and I sigh louder. She sighs again, and it's official. We are in a sigh-off. And on the honor of my ancestors, I will win. NECA? Banana? I told you not to fucking call me that. Or what? Whatever. Lunch? Already ate mine. Girl, it's 10 a.m. Life is short. Buy me lunch? No, Francisca says, but she sucks her teeth hard and tries not to smile, so I pull up the menus for the fancy sandwich place and start triaging ingredients. On our way back, we stop in a bar for secret lunch cocktails, and Francisca tells me about her family, particularly her brother, whose squandered potential has broken all their hearts. I'm listening, but I'm crossing my eyes a bit so they don't focus on the countdown above her head. I can do that sometimes, but it's like the don't think of pink elephants gambit. I'm stuck knowing when. I will always know when a person will die, but this is the way I avoid conjuring up the how. When I saw the how of my parents' death, a head-on collision in rush hour traffic, I did everything to stop it. It wouldn't happen for almost a decade, but I warned them, begged them, worried them with the anxious child I became. Before I left for classes that day, I made them promise they wouldn't leave the house. They promised, just to make me happy, and so that all this nonsense would end. Someone, my father, damn his prankster heart, thought it would be funny for them to pick me up from school together, to prove how silly I'd been all along. Francisca is worried about her brother, and I almost scream at her to worry about herself. I am the last in the string of temps Frana Banana will run off because Francisca Thibodeau will die in 12 days. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Terry Ellen Cross Davis is the author of A More Perfect Union, winner of the 2019 Journal Charles B. Wheeler Poetry Prize, published by Mad Creek Books in 2021, and Haint, published by Gival Press 2021, winner of the 2017 Ohioana Book Award for Poetry. Her work has been honored with the Maryland State Arts Council Independent Artist Award, the Poetry Society of America's Robert H. Winter Memorial Award, and Sustainable Arts Grant and a Murray Grant from the Freya Project. A Cave Canem Fellow, she is the poetry coordinator for the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C., and lives in Maryland with her husband, poet Hayes Davis, and their 2 children. She grew up in a small African American and Jamaican community in rural Connecticut and earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Connecticut and her master's degree from Syracuse University. Welcome, Terry.
Yeah.
Terry, oh, I'm so sorry. I have done a terrible copy and paste thing. So let me just end properly with Terry's bio with an apology. Terry is a Cave Canem Fellow. She is the poetry coordinator for the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C., and lives in Maryland with her husband, poet Hayes Davis, and their 2 children. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you. It has just been, you all are giving me life. When Mary said, so white, it could have shamed a ghost, I was laughing. It warmed the cockles of my heart. That heroic crying sonnet on LeBron. Oh my gosh, that is everything. My husband came in, sat down and listened for the entire thing. And oh my goodness, every story has an ending. A psychiatrist in a greeting card in the trench coat. That was great. I was just writing down lines like mad. But okay, so I'll just jump in and I'll start. I was This is a poem from my second book. It's called Crescendo. I was reading about the situation in Minnesota. Another Black man did. Crescendo. My son nest, pawing each pillow like a breast, fleshed out and so newly forgotten. I've spanked him once tonight. He takes turns laughing, then crying, defiant, then hungry. In his mouth, my name, all need, pursed lips plead, mommy, and I am guilty of the same sin. I miss his curled and tucked weight, embryo, the deepest root yanked clean. This is why babies are born crying into this world, having held fast to such an intimate tether, who willingly would let go again. But today, another white cop walked free. Another Black body was still on the ground, not indicted, undoubtedly the future outcome. 4 years ago, I crossed labor's red sea of pain to birth a boy. No doctor hit his backside. Now I raise my hand to complete an act older than me, breaking the Black back of the boy to make a man who can survive in America. Mommy, he calls me, and my teats threaten to weep old milk at our stasis. Both of us needing the succor of sleep, both of us fighting, him to keep me near, me punishing him to be left alone. He crawls into my lap. His heart is 3, his body a lanky 4. I cover him with a blanket too thin to mean it. We rock on the edge of his bed, listening to the symphony's 4th movement, the crescendo, sweet, full of tension, violin strings singing. I think Mozart must have known something of loving with such a tender fear that it breaks you open like a welt that bleeds to heal. Tonight, I give up, cuddling this boy so full of belief in himself. I'm too tired with love to beat it out of him. And I wanted to read this poem because I come from women who were domestics. And one of my favorite poet of all time, Lucille Clifton, wrote an incredible poem called Study the Masters. And it felt like it gave me permission to write about these women who uplifted my life. The Goddess of Cleaning. And just to say, Courtney, I think you're saying you didn't know your Greek myths. I was a big fan of Greek myths and comic books, The Uncanny X-Men circa 1987. And so I was way into myths. So in this collection, I created my own goddesses, 9 of them. But this is one, the Goddess of Cleaning. I bequeath you bleach, its singeing sting. I bequeath you the scrub brush, best done on hands and knees. I bequeath you ammonia for the exorcism of dirt. I bequeath you power over clutter, the washing machine spin, the dryer's lint grin. I bequeath you the salvation of sweeping, a consecrated grip on the broomstick. I bequeath you the dustpan's collection plate, the floor's sanctified echo, the trash bin's penitent face. I bequeath you the gospel of a mop, the sacred slosh of a rinse bucket's second coming. I bequeath you the torn t-shirt as rag, the two-sided sponge, vinegar and newspaper squeak, the glass free of streak. I bequeath you an old toothbrush for tiles hard to reach grime. I bequeath you the grunt and scrub of wool, the eradication of rust. Trust in me, I baptize you in sweat's labor batific stain. I bequeath you the power to change one room at a time. And I looked at this poem and I had to read it now because I wrote it a long time. I love how sometimes writing a poem is writing the future, then I'll explain. But yeah, sometimes it's writing the future. This is called Co-Sleeping. And I will tell you that I have 2 children. I have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old. Co-sleeping. Years from now, when they are teens, out studying the art of lying, I am told I will treasure this imperfect sleep. 2 and 4-year-old feet in my back and stomach, soft bodies fattened by my milk, such slight impressions they make on a queen-size mattress. My weight, a well, sinks them closer. I breathe in the stupor of their sweet rot breath. My children are alive. I taste the words, lull them in my mouth like a chewed pacifier, each petite exhalation secure knowledge. I swaddle this fact, fold it tight, tuck in its edges, wrap it again, alive. In this moment, on this night, I burrow in, knowing sleep won't come, but curl around them, a shield, settled and still. And then just one more, and then I'll just shift over very quickly to some new work. So this is when my first book came out, and my husband's first book came out. We traveled to Ireland and did a little bit of a literary tour. So this is me on the way back, and Aer Lingus is the major airline out of Ireland. A Black woman gets a window seat on Aer Lingus. Enough, Ireland. For all your lush effusion of color, inside me blooms a masochistic loneliness. Give me the screws I know best. The policeman quick to test my yes, sir, as acidless. Trigger the Midwest. Never on the Bible school test was this. Crucifixion kills, not nails into feet or wrists, but the weight borne upon the breast. You suffocate slowly in your own flesh. As I return to the upright cross of the U.S., I breathe easier, I breathe less. And then I wanted to share some new work. So one is a gardening poem, like a lot of people. I didn't do the whole bread thing. I gardened during the quarantine. So playing God. One, Old Testament God. Bathed in bug spray, sunglasses, headphones on, I narrow the world to dirt and dig. My fingers follow tendrils, spindly runners, winding to clover's heart. I pull. I grip the goosegrass, Bermuda grass, and nimblewill. Chokeweed, Bedford strangler, lamb's quarter, even common violet I gather and smite with one hand. Weeding clarifies want. Witness the dandelion's milk-white root bared naked from the crumbling earth. I am remaking the world into the image I want. 2, New Testament God. If I name a plant, months later it's a seedling reaching for the sun. With these small brown hands I raise the slumbering tuber, the budding bulb, the catatonic seed, until blossoms bigger than my head dip to greet me. As bees parade in a pollen stupor, I get drunk on the Asiatic lily's deep pink trumpet, its slow fade to white. I glory in the biblical plague of rows of Sharon babies and sing gospels to the white lilac's tower of blossoms. I mold this rectangular pink patch inch by inch, knowing where the sun peers through layers of oak leaves, where the lily of the valley spread themselves in shadow. I know the Japanese anemones hunger as they fight the hosta's elegant unspindling. Every May is a fragrant revelation, and in these 800 square feet, my hand is the power and the glory. Amen. And I'll end with this one, which is a really new poem. And I'm calling it Birth of a Nation, Cuts on the Editing Floor. And it has an epigraph or epithang, as Miss Lucille Clifton liked to call them. George Armwood was lynched in Somerset County, Maryland on October 18, 1933. He was 22 or 23 years old and had been accused of attempted assault and rape of 71-year-old Mary Dinston 2 days before. Black trauma's always been the addictive additive to movie theater popcorn since the first blockbuster. See this country, a cinematic iris in black-white silence. Mutilating Black bodies, a white pastime, a picnic, complete with canoptic, contemptible collectives. Match cuts of swinging bodies, baseball and apple pie. Jump cut of red and white check tablecloth and nooses. Maryland's last lynching, even the governor and National Guard couldn't keep a sober crowd of 2,000 from their delights. Montage of white high school girls sauntering by to see the, quote, barbecue, unquote, boyfriends in tow. White women will now read the role of linchpin for racial violence. Continuity editing fast forwards 90 years to air swollen, infected in Somerset County, Maryland. Written on the plaque erected near the standing lynching tree, words remembering the beaten body of George Armwood. His remains dumped in a lumberyard. Breathing Black bodies, children and adults had to bear witness the next day, walking to school, to work. In America's Cut, this detail and the Black girl ran over by the frothing mob lie on the editing floor. I have seen this movie enough times to predict the script. No white body ever faced an indictment for any lynching in Maryland. Today in Salisbury, white women are chatting, laughing. Across the street is the tourism office, next door the mayor. Recent studies say trauma can change genes, be passed down, inherited. The children who saw George's mutilated body will be slightly older than my grandparents. Epigenetics suggests this mix of rage and fear is my patriotic legacy. America, I'm tired of watching this movie. Even when I close my eyes, the screen never fades to black long enough to let me go. Right. Thank you all for this time and the ability to share new work. And just hearing you all, this was really inspiring.
Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you all for sharing this incredible work with us and for putting this work into the world. It's just such a pleasure to be in your company. I would love to kick off the conversation by asking Mary to talk about her work as witness.
Well, thank you, Karen. And oh, Terry, you blew me away. It's, I feel the same way. Listening to everybody, I was kind of numb this week. We all saw the news. We all see the news. The news repeats. So it's just good to hear all of us working with reality, but also putting some meaning and some thought and some hope or whatever we need to do to use that material rather than let that material destroy us or destroy our children. I'm going to start with Terry's. Terry, you used this line, I have seen this movie enough. When I wrote the collection that I read from during the COVID quarantine, and for me it was like it was George Floyd, it was everything that was on the television, and I was just bursting. But can't leave the house, and so I looked into my own neighborhood. I live in the hood. When I moved into this neighborhood, I was working in a white suburban school district, and people said, "Do you know where you're living? It was formerly redlined. Your house is not going to increase in value." But I absolutely love my neighborhood, and I feel as if everyone here has seen everything over and over and over again. I talk to my neighbors, and they've been here a lot longer than I have. They've lived in this house. They used to live in that house, and they remember the store was there, and all these memories and everything that go on. So when I didn't set out to write anything in particular, but what I wanted to write was the story of their and my experiences living as a Black woman, but living in a neighborhood where things repeat, not necessarily just in bad ways, but things can be beautiful that can come out of that as well. So to me, the challenge of witnessing is just working with that material without having it destroy you, but also making something beautiful out of it, because our lives are beautiful. We don't live in trauma 24/7, but we are human and we want to write about it. So I'm kind of interested in hearing what everyone else has to say about that. Terry, can I send it back to you there?
Definitely. And thank you, Mary, for that, for your answer to that and kind of just jumpstarting this whole conversation. I thought about witness down to the witness t-shirts that in my mind were in court, like I was like, oh my gosh, that's there too. And it is, I love what you said too, about being able to absorb things without letting it destroy you. And so I love the intense scrutiny and intellectual scrutiny and intense emotions that were brought to air tonight in you all's work. And I love that you all are using where we are right now in America as a way to stand up rather than be pushed down. And I think it's so good to hear that sometimes, because it gets to be an echo chamber when you're on your own head. And even in quarantine, when we're just in our own homes. And I'm like, my whole deal in quarantine was to keep my family alive. It's just like, forget everything else. As long as these 3 people are alive and I can keep them alive, then that's what I'm doing. But I think about that in Witness now. And I think about the last poem I read. and how these issues happen, how things happen in America. And America is so not willing to see the complexity of its history, and so willing to whittle it down to a whitewashed version that is simplistic and ignorant. And I think it's our charge in so many ways to remind this country forever and forever that the Black woman's uterus was its first credit card. It was forever banking on what we could do with these bodies to keep a new labor force engaged. So I think about that power of witness, and I think about how we take information and not spin it, but we absorb it and then write it back out in a way that you can't help but recognize how much not spin, but the polish we put on it. You know what I mean? And it's like, because I'm thinking a lot too, Courtney, about your LeBron poem. That, I'm always here for a sonnet. I work at the Folger Shakespeare Library. And I'm thinking too about how you were able to take all this information, much like you did. You took all this information, like we've been doing all night in our craft, and put it back with this added detail, this added weight. And so I feel like that is part of the witnessing, to say that we are here, we see this, we've experienced this, and this is our truth. So I'd love for you, Courtney, to talk about the weight of witness, if you will. And also just to talk a little bit about the facts, because I recognize in that poem, you had so many basketball data details. And so I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, I feel like Terry touched on something in that, like, I don't know, sometimes witness can feel like a passive word. Like, yeah, I witnessed that. I saw that. I was a witness to this. But it very much is like a witnessing can be very much a verb, and something that is that a lot of people actually don't do and don't practice. And I have to remind myself that because I feel like as a writer, witnessing it's the way that we approach life. We are witnessing the fullness of everything. And we are looking at the nuances and turning it and, researching facts, thinking about emotions, placing ourselves in other characters and other people, and trying to understand and grapple and reckon. And I think witnessing is also like a reckoning, and a lot of people don't do that. I think what also happens, at least with me on the page, because I feel like witnessing sometimes also feels one-dimensional. And as a writer, I feel like the page is probably one of the only places I feel like I have sort of control or agency over the domain fully. So I have to think about, like, if I'm witnessing whatever, who am I being responsible to, accountable to when I'm writing on the page? And then also, I feel like there's so many possibilities when it comes to the page. One thing that I love about poetry is, like, you can lean on elements of fiction and nonfiction to say what you want to say and make something feel, like Tony K. Bombara said, like, that revolution can be irresistible. So I feel like in my craft, I use a lot of images. I focus on a lot of small details. I use a lot of magical realism, and I like to use the elements of fiction to not just reflect back what's happening in the world, but to create some agency over what I'm witnessing. And I feel like that's the magic of writing for me. It's what excites me. It's what keeps me going. It makes me want to write fiction in the future one day. But that poetry form is still just nice and bite-sized for me at this moment. But I would love to hear from Leslie of, like, these kind of magical realism fiction elements that you use in your work as a jumping off point, and how you kind of relate that to witnessing, and sort of what led you to use some of those tools in your work.
Join us on Team Fiction, Courtney, anytime you're ready. Whenever you're ready, we're ready for you. just some really wonderful points that have been brought up. To answer Courtney's questions, I'll do it in sort of two parts. When it comes to just magical realism in general, I find it as a very interesting craft tool, because it allows, I feel like one of the, not just magical, I guess I'd maybe say speculative fiction in general, I feel like it allows the writer to essentially turn the volume up on reality in a way that that exposes our systems or mutates them in some way, or just I really love even like reading speculative fiction that takes some aspect of our social society or culture that is just so immutable that it's faded into the background, and have something that sort of brings it forward, right? And I just it's just something that I find that speculative fiction can do in a way that realism can't. Which is not to say that, I mean, I write realism as well, so it's not to say that realism is limited, but and the example I like to use is that we talk when we lose someone who we love, we talk like it's almost a cliche to say, oh, if I could just have one more day, right? With the things, what I'd say, what I do, and speculative fiction allows you to give a character that one day and see like what do they do with that. In terms of witnessing, when I started writing, a lot of my witnessing was I was really interested in like dissecting the family unit and sort of bearing witness to all the different ways that a family can come together and fall apart. And so a lot of my work focused on family relationship, particularly mother-daughter relationships. And now I am, I think probably because I have been sort of unmothered for a while now. My mother passed away several years ago. My attention, I'm more interested in like witnessing friendships, witnessing non-familiar relationships, and just the ways in which, like for me, these are relationships that I turn to in distress, when I'm in distress. And so now I'm just sort of fascinated by, the anatomy of a friendship, right? The vagaries of romantic relationships. These are the things that sort of are catching my imagination and my attention now, and just adding, sort of adding the sort of the spice of the invented element, the speculative element, just allows me to do something there that is interesting for me to do. I'm less bored, but also doing that sort of volume turning. All right, so we're like, okay, this is a quote unquote typical relationship. Well, what does a typical relationship look like if you move it into a completely different setting, a setting that is unnatural to it? Does it still hold up? Does it still maintain its boundaries? Does it still work? And I'm just really interested in questions like that.
I would love to know what you are reading. I had a few questions in my pocket, but these answers that you just gave were so rich and full and complete. I don't want you to feel like you are repeating, but if in the answer about what you're reading, you might also want to touch on elements of craft, questions of craft that you're working on. I think that might be interesting as well, and I'll let you decide where you want to go with that. Leslie?
Absolutely. This is my my favorite thing to do, is to tell people what I'm reading and to recommend books to people. And so this is a perfect question. Thank you, Karen. I just finished reading Monstrio by Gabriel Cordova, I believe a Mexican writer. It's translated work, and it was and I don't, without just no spoilers, this happens in the first couple of pages. It's a young couple who have lost their 4-year-old son, who was born with a heart defect, and in the fit of grief, the mother cuts his body open and steals one of his ribs. And then she, moves back to Mexico, moves back home, and is here's this mythology from one of her mother's closest friend. Here's this mythology about how you can essentially grow a person back if you have a part of them, and this that's sort of how the book begins, and it is just wondrous and monstrous and moving and just a really compelling work. And I just found it very interesting. I thought it was quite interesting where the writer took it. It's one of those stories that in different hands with that premise, I mean, it can go so many different ways. And I thought the way he took it was very interesting. And to say more would spoil it. And so I won't do that because I think that I don't want to cheat anyone from that experience of reading it. And so that's a book that I've recently finished that I just really, truly enjoyed. I am currently reading, so I say currently, I read 3 to 8 books a week, and so I'm currently reading means a lot of books. So, but I'm currently reading Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon. This is an Irish writer, and he is writing, and it's a it takes place in sort of ancient in ancient Greek. Speaking of mythologies, it takes place in the ancient Greek, and it is about these 2 soldiers who are trying to put on a play with these captives that they have in this like pit, and it is both horrifying and it's very funny. Ferdia Lennon, he knew what he was doing. Also, very horrifying, very funny, and very moving. And what I find very interesting craft-wise there is, there's a level of irony at work that's carrying a lot of the story weight in the book. And I'm only about a 10th of the way through, so I can't really speak more. But there is this really interesting element there. And I'll talk about 2 more books, and I will pass it on to someone else. This is not a book that I'm reading now, but it's a book that I finished. Like I read a few years ago, but I'm currently rereading it, and it's one of the books I really love to recommend to people because it is a book that it's a literary work of fiction that's pulled off something that I have not seen any literary novel do in recent memory, and I can't say what that is because it's a spoiler, but it's All's Well by Mona Awad. And this is also another book that has sort of like a speculative, like magical element to it, where she essentially, like, the main character essentially makes a deal with the devil, or like a devil type entity, and it is just a truly wonderful another book that I think I'm drawn to books that are dark and funny, like that play with if you're a writer who's able to make something that's very sort of dark and terrible also funny, you've won me over. Like I'm there. And then the last book that I will talk about is there's so many. Okay, the last book I will talk about is a book that I always talk about is Man vs. Nature by Diane Cook. And it is honestly one of the most wonderful, engaging, and inventive short story collections that I've read. And it is very much like the blueprint for a lot of work that you see right now, where people, I feel like she was very much at the vanguard of this renaissance of speculative literature, in like the literary world, like, because she was so early, I think that it's a book that has passed that a lot of people have sort of gone beyond notice, but it's one of it's honestly a classic in my opinion. And I'm very sorry, one more. I will stop after this, I promise. speaking of speculative fiction collections that are just like truly magnificent, Ghost Roots by a young Nigerian writer, Pemi Guda, and that one just came out this year. And she has a story in there called Girly that how you're reading a story and you get a feel for a story and you kind of know where it's going. This story, like, it turns on a dime so many times that all of the expectations that I brought to the page reading that story were just they were all every expectation I had was defied. Like, she defied, you think, oh, it's this kind of story, and then nope, it turns and it's like, oh, it's this kind of story, and then it turns again. It's just really truly wonderful. I read so much because I'm like, I want to read everything. I want to know every book that's out there, and I would love to hear what you are reading, Mary.
Well, I hate to disappoint you because I read so much in the winter, and I have been reading a lot, but the last book I read was about a month ago, and then I stopped, and that was and you'll understand why maybe. I read Jesmyn Ward's Let Us Descend, which I had put off, and it was a lot. And every book I picked up after that, I kept thinking, no, I'm still processing that book. And the other reason I'm not reading now, which I usually do, not quite as much as you, Leslie, is because I'm working on a long fiction piece, and that I postponed in order to do the story collection to work on that. So I'm back in this really mammoth kind of black fairy tale that I'm doing, memoir fairy tale sort of thing. So I am actually reading things like How We Do It. I don't know if you read this. I love this book. I really love this book. And other craft books, like Matt Bell has a craft book, Refuse to Be Done. So I'm refusing to be done, and I'm determined to finish this mammoth thing this week. This week, that would be great. This summer, because every time I tell people about it, around here, they look at me with sadness, like, oh, she ain't never gonna publish that thing. It's just so huge, and there's so many characters, but I'm kind of immersed in reading my own thing right now, which was why last night, the last thing I read was I reread your book, What It Means When a Man Falls from the Sky, and I was just all that speculative. But the first time I read it, I just loved the book. But this time when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, all this speculative business that's going on. In particular, the story about the wife, the mother who comes back from the dead. And I just absolutely realized I love that story. And so anyway, so that was the very, very last thing I read was your book, Leslie. But before that, it was, have you all read Jesmyn Ward's book? It's just very sad and that long trek. It just kind of destroyed me a little bit, a lot of it. And so I'm taking a break for reading. How about you, Terry? What are you reading?
I'm reading. I think not as much as Leslie, but what did I just read? I just reread Upgraded by Blake Crouch because we were on a long car ride with the family. We had a family residency. So we were driving to Florida from Silver Spring, which is a nice little drive. So we wanted our kids to hear that one because I turned my husband onto it and he read it. And I was like, yeah, let's do this again. I'm currently in the middle of The Future, Naomi Alderman's The Future. I just finished Max Brooks's De-Evolution, and before that I read This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal E. Matar and Max Gladstone. So those, I had to go back in my Libby account, like, oh, what am I reading? Because you just like, and I'm one of those people, I will juggle a lot of books at once. I was reading some book on the body because I'm always intrigued by the body. And of course, and there's always, but like poetry books, I'm rereading Yasina Montia's Muse in the Colonized Body because I'm bringing her with Claudia Rankine in the fall to the Folger. So, and so now I'll have to go back in and dive into some Paul Muldoon because I'm also bringing him. So it's like little stuff like that. So I'm always, reading poetry. But I also should say, I have two sisters. One's a horror writer and a librarian at DC Public Library, and the other one's a children's book librarian in Cleveland. So we're always sharing books. It's like a little hive of bees, just like, ooh, what are you reading? So I love to throw that back to you, Courtney. What are you reading?
Okay, so I just did an event with Joseph Earl Thomas and read both Sink, his memoir, but also his new fiction book called God Bless You, Otis Spunkmeyer. And I would highly recommend both. The fiction book was incredible. It's the premise is it's basically like an Army veteran who is now working at a level 1 like trauma center. And the entire book is told through one shift at that trauma center. So that's sort of like the steady thing that you can always rely on, and it will always come back to the shift and the work at hand. But sort of what's running underneath are all of these memories, and eventually people from the main character's past start showing up as patients at the trauma center. And so it's just an incredible book. It's about care, it's about trauma, it's about just the complicated nature of relationships and friendships. And it's also deeply funny, which I don't think it gets enough credit for. Joseph Earl Thomas is a very, very incredible comedic writer, and also Leslie, to your point, a lot of like dark humor, making very dark situations somehow you're laughing, and then the next moment you're kind of crying, which I love. I love those like wrestling feelings. And I'm also just interested in that kind of structure. Again, I'm not working on fiction, but I just like craft. I read a lot of self-help books. Like, I feel embarrassed to say it, but I need all the help I can get. So I'm reading right now, I'm always having like a parenting book. The one I'm reading right now is called, I think it's called Boy Mom, Reimagining Boyhood in the Age of Impossible Masculinity. So it's kind of about deconstructing what we say when we say boys will be boys, and kind of revealing the ways that we kind of tear young boys' gentleness away from them in very minuscule ways as they are growing up, and kind of how to unlearn that and undo that as a parent. So I am studying, highlighting, discussing that. I'm reading a book of poems called Fox Woman Get Out by India Lena Gonzalez, I think. And it's very experimental. This book of poems uses space in a way that's really refreshing. It's rooted in a lot of dance. So I love movement across the page, and how that impacts the emotion as you're reading the words. So that's the debut book that came out last year. And I'm probably gonna go home and finish it. But yeah, those are some of the things I'm reading. I also took notes on everyone's recommendations so I can add to my list.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for this incredibly enjoyable time together with you. You've given us so much to think about, and it's just such a pleasure knowing you and knowing your work. And thank you again. Thanks to everybody for joining us, and thank you to Elizabeth's Bookshop for creating a bookshelf where you can order the books of these writers. And we'll see you